Writing an argument. In this course, most of the writing that you will be doing will be in argument format. This is a form of expository writing, as distinguished from narrative writing, and it has very specific elements that need to be included to be an adequate argument. If you haven't had much experience writing an argument style, you may find it a bit challenging initially, but over time and with effort and feedback, you will grow in proficiency, so be encouraged. In this video, I will share how to write the argument paper, but will not be discussing how to write an abstract for the paper. I have posted on Canvas a video that covers how to write an abstract. So let's get started on how to write a solid argument at the university level. An argument paper has the following structure. 1. An introduction. The introduction of the paper has several functions. A. It should grab the reader's attention or interest. Some people call this a hook. It could be an interesting and relevant fact, an important point, highlight the relevance of a point, a quote, etc. However, the argument is a formal piece of writing, so it should be an academic voice, not informal or chatty, and certainly not written in a flowery, creative writing style. B. The introduction, which is typically a paragraph in length, must contain a thesis statement. One of the best form of thesis statements is called an enthymeme. An enthymeme has three parts. 1. A claim. 2. The word because. 3. Brief statement of the evidence supporting the claim. 4. Here is an example of an enthymeme or good thesis statement. Learning how to write an argument is essential for success at the university level because it is valued by professors, it is objective and logical, it can be highly persuasive, and is structured so that it can be easily read. 2. The paragraphs following the introduction, which are called the body of the paper, should be written in the following format. 1. Each paragraph should cover the evidence mentioned in the enthymeme or thesis statement. 2. The paragraph should be written such that the first paragraph of the body should be the most persuasive piece of evidence, and the last paragraph before the conclusion should contain the second most persuasive piece of evidence. 3. If you learned in high school or earlier that a paper should be written with an introduction, 3 points or paragraphs in the body, and a conclusion, please do not use this format in an argument. The body of the paper should use as many paragraphs as is needed to cover all the pieces of evidence to support the major claim of the argument. Function is more important than structure on this issue. 3. The conclusion has several important functions. A. It is to be a summary, very brief summary of the main points of the paper without repeating what was said in the paper. It is a summary, not a rehash of the paper. B. It should end by grabbing the reader's attention, so it should be interesting, but still written in academic voice. There are other elements that help make an argument more robust and persuasive. Here are some of these elements. 1. Write the paper as though you know that someone who has an opposing view from yours. This means that in your paper you acknowledge that someone could reasonably take a different position. Describe that opposing position briefly, fairly, and accurately. Do not commit what is called a straw man argument, which is committed when we unfairly describe the opposing view and then argue against the unfair characterization of the opposing view. So, anticipate a critical response to your position or piece of evidence and then address it in your paper. In this way, you are showing why your position is a good position. 2. All arguments are about sharing information and doing so persuasively. Rhetorical theory informs us that there are 3 elements of writing that do both inform and persuade. Those elements are called logos, pathos, and ethos. Let's cover each of these elements. A. Logos means that our writing should be logically appealing to an audience. This is the essence of an argument, so if you write a good argument that has the points already covered in this video, that is, backing up claims with relevant and complete support, then the appeal to logos would be fine. So, be sure that you always give evidence for a claim, reason without committing any logical fallacies, and use good solid evidence in the form of facts, statistics, data, etc. B. Pathos means that the argument appeals to the intended audience emotionally. This does mean that you forget logic and just appeal to emotions or write emotionally. It means that you write logically in a way that also makes a connection with the reader, and this is often best done by touching the reader's empathy. Using a vivid example the audience would understand can function in this way. C. Ethos means that the argument establishes you as a credible person or writer. People are more persuaded if you seem to be believable or trustworthy. How can we do this? There are several ways, such as use reliable sources rather than strange or unreliable sources. An example would be to cite a research paper or an expert in the area under consideration rather than someone who embraces a conspiracy theory. Cite an unreliable source such as TikTok, etc. 3. Remember to structure the paper so it is organized, clear, easy to follow, and each paragraph in the body of the paper is devoted to one and only one piece of evidence. 4. Use a variety of kinds of evidence, realizing that different types of evidence has different levels of persuasive power. Let's consider some common types of evidence. One type of evidence is empirical evidence, which is the strongest form of evidence. It takes the form of research findings, data, and results of experiments. A second type of evidence is expert testimony. Here one needs to be careful that the expert is an expert in the area under consideration. For example, using a renowned athlete's opinion about treatment of anxiety would be inadequate unless the athlete is educated in the treatment of anxiety. Even if the athlete experiences anxiety would not make the athlete capable of legitimately functioning as offering expert testimony. A third form of evidence is much weaker than the first two forms of evidence is anecdotal evidence, which means personal stories or experiences. In this course, I do not accept anecdotal evidence except perhaps used in the introduction to grab attention. Anecdotes should not be used in the body of the paper. Writing a solid logical argument not only has the features already discussed in this video, but it must refrain from containing any logical fallacies. A logical fallacy is committed when the evidence is inadequate in one or more of three ways. The evidence is ambiguous, the evidence is insufficient, and the evidence is irrelevant. Let's look at some examples of logical fallacies in these three categories. Fallacies of relevance. 1. Ad hominem fallacy. This is when the writer attacks the character of someone rather than discusses the logic of the other person's argument. It is never acceptable in an academic piece of writing to attack a person. 2. Ad populum fallacy. This is when instead of appealing to logic and evidence, the writer says that what is written is true because it is what most people believe. 3. Genetic fallacy. This is when the writer says that a view or argument is inadequate, invalid, or false because of where the argument came from. For example, if the writer rejects research findings on the effectiveness of a medicine because the research was conducted or financially sponsored by a pharmaceutical company. A writer could be cautious or doubtful, but can't logically reject something because of the origin of the idea, position, or argument. 4. Ad ignorant iam fallacy. This is when the writer says that since her view can't be proven wrong, that it is true. This is illogical. A view can be right, wrong, or perhaps we just don't have enough evidence to even hold a logical position. 5. Straw man argument. We have already covered this form of logical fallacy. Fallacies of insufficient evidence. 1. Post hoc fallacy. This fallacy is committed when a writer asserts that because one thing follows another, then the first thing is the cause of the second. A real example of a post hoc fallacy is one that made in interpreting research. The researchers found that in states with high milk consumption that there was a greater incidence of cancer. They concluded that drinking milk caused cancer. However, with a bit more investigation, it was found that individuals who drank milk tended to live longer, and it is known that older individuals are more likely to develop cancer. So actually, drinking milk was not the cause of the cancer. 2. Hasty generalization. This fallacy is committed when a writer forms a conclusion based on an insufficient amount of evidence. For example, if one concludes that 6 people who took a medication got better, then the medication helped individuals get better. Thousands of individuals would need to be studied to make such a conclusion, and even then the claim might need to be qualified. 3. Biased sample. This fallacy is committed when a writer makes a conclusion on a sample that is not representative. For example, one study about the stages of moral development in individuals concluded that the highest form of moral reasoning was based on logic. However, the study failed to include female subjects, so the study was guilty of biased sample. 4. Anecdotal argument. This fallacy is committed when a writer offers as complete and sufficient evidence a story. This is why anecdotal evidence is weak evidence. As you can see, writing an argument involves multiple issues to consider. To write an argument that is logically adequate, appeals to the emotions of an audience, establishes the credibility of the author, and avoids committing any logical fallacies. However, with practice and paying attention to the responses of the professor, writing good arguments is possible. If you encounter any problems writing an argument, please do not hesitate to contact the Student Success Center at Columbia International University. You can attend in person on the 2nd floor of the university library or chat via phone. All the best.